Today we're going to be looking at if it's normal to move on quickly after a breakup. And the short answer to this is that it depends on what you consider to be normal. So for example, our research has indicated that most people tend to move on from a breakup about 6 months to a year after the breakup occurs. So theoretically, anytime your ex is moving on to someone else before then, it can be considered quick. However, this is a really nuanced topic and really requires us to take a hard look at the following things. Number one is just sort of establishing a baseline normal time frame. Number two is taking a deeper look at how rebounds affect this. Number three is dismissive avoidants aren't as likely to quickly jump into another relationship. And number four is looking at fearful avoidants and how they are more likely to be caught in on-again, off-again relationships. So let's begin. Let's sort of establish what the normal time frame it is for someone to move on. So when I first started trying to plan this video out, the major issue I kept running into was determining what quickly meant. And it sounds sort of ridiculous, I know, but who's to say what's quick or not? For one person, quick might be 2 weeks. For another person, quick might be 2 months. So what the general public really lacks when looking at this question is sort of a baseline on what the normal average is in which someone moves on after a breakup. So my first thought was to take a deeper look at when rebound relationships started. However, I thought that wasn't quite what was needed. Rebound in general are considered quick. What we need is something to compare quick to. And it really wasn't until I stumbled across this article from Bustle of all places that I found an expert who defined the average time it takes to move on from a breakup. And really, this expert's name is Alexis Nicole White. Many times people are ready to start seriously dating anywhere from 6 months to a year after a major breakup, but it still largely depends on the length of time they spent in the relationship. So you're considered normal if you move on in this time frame. 6 months to 1 year equals normal. Therefore, any person who moves on to a new individual before that, statistically, would be considered as moving on too quick. They'd be considered going on the rebound. But will they really? Well, I think we need to take a deeper look at rebounds in general. So you may think you know everything about rebounds, but I'm here to tell you that you don't. In fact, I'm about to blow your mind when it comes to them. Now, I consider rebounds to be extremely relevant to this discussion we're having for the simple fact that rebounds, by definition, are relationships that happen quickly. So in other words, I consider them to be essential to answering the question on if it's normal to move on quickly after a breakup. Basically, if most people go on the rebound after a breakup, then moving on quickly actually is the norm. If most people don't go on the rebound after a breakup, then it's not normal. Not exactly a perfect research question and answer, but it gets us starting somewhere. So what is the answer? Well, believe it or not, I couldn't find any research on this. Crazy. So I decided to do what I always do when I hit snags like this, and I did the research myself using my own private Facebook support group. So essentially, I put this question to them. I said, so this is kind of weird. I'm writing an article and filming a video about rebound relationships. Specifically, I'm trying to figure out the answer to how common they are. Yet no matter how much I dig, I can't find anyone that has done any research on this. So let's do it ourselves. For reference, I'm defining the average rebound relationship as starting 3 months post-breakup where you haven't dealt with your feelings from your ex. So here's the question. In your previous relationships, on average, how long would you say it takes for you to move on to someone new? And the results were pretty drastic. 26% of people said that it usually took them 1 to 3 months to move on after a breakup. 11% said that it only took them 3 to 6 months to move on. 60% said it took them 6 to 12 months. So it seems from this data that it's pretty clear to me that rebound relationships are not the norm. In fact, this data actually proves that having an ex move on quickly after a breakup isn't usually normal compared to average relationship trends. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean a rebound is a bad thing. Yes, most will fail, but in some cases, it can be helpful in the moving on process from some people. No judgment at all here. What I'm more interested in right now is what's going through someone's head when they rebound. What makes us want to move on quickly? And I think the answer lies in looking at attachment styles. Now, unless you've been living under a rock or you haven't read my blog or watched my YouTube channel for the past year, you know that really 2022 has been the year of the avoidant. To give you some background, an avoidant attachment style is a subset of attachment theory, which is defined by Wikipedia as a psychological, evolutionary, and ethological theory concerning relationships between humans. Yeah. Basically, here's what it is. There are 4 core attachment styles. You have secure, anxious, avoidant, and fearful. Now, each of these attachment styles has different ways in which they handle issues throughout relationships. And based on which segment you fall into is basically how you're going to handle most of your relationship headwinds that you experience. Now, I consider the avoidant attachment style to be quite relevant to our discussion, namely because of this graphic right here. So this graphic basically outlines the entire life of a relationship for an avoidant. And yes, it is designed to be a wheel because an avoidant is often trapped in a prison of their own making without realizing it. But before I explain why this graphic is relevant to our discussion, let's do a quick breakdown of the avoidant attachment style. So the avoidant attachment style generally is a person who values their own independence over their own relationship. So they're natural lone wolves. They avoid emotional connection with others when their independence becomes threatened. But how does this relate to rebounds? Okay, so look at this graphic. There are 8 stages to this wheel. The avoidant wants someone to love them. They enter into a relationship with you. They notice some worrying things in that relationship about you. They think of leaving you. They actually leave you. They're happy they left you. They begin to feel kind of lonely. They wonder why they can't find anyone anymore. And then they kind of go and start the wheel over again. They want someone to love them. They enter into a new relationship with someone new or a new relationship with you. Now, to make our lives easier, I've decided to color code the wheel and divide it up into 4 distinct stages. So here we have sort of a peach color. I consider this to be the honeymoon period. It contains stages 1 and 2. Then we have the pink color. This is sort of the problems arising stage, stages 3 and 4. Then you have sort of the light blue color, which is the relief period stage. And then you have a green color, which is sort of the depression period stage. Now, this becomes relevant for us specifically in that green color and specifically stages 7 and 8. I'm starting to feel lonely. Why can't I ever find the right person? Almost every avoidant after a breakup hits this point where they begin to feel sorry for themselves. Why is it that I ever can't find the right person for me? This period often leads them to react in one of 2 ways, and their attachment style will determine it. And here's the really tricky thing about avoidance. There are really 2 types. There are dismissive avoidants and fearful avoidants. And based on what type of avoidant you're dealing with will give you some insight into why they're moving on so quickly. It doesn't seem like it would make sense, right? After all, aren't avoidants the type of person who wants to be alone? Well, yes and no. So according to Free to Attach, which is one of my favorite attachment websites, an avoidant can have a depressive episode from 2 to 4 months after a breakup, manifested in feeling numb, disconnected, and meaningless, which they may try to repress. Want to take a guess at how an avoidant will try to repress those feelings? By distracting themselves with someone else. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they will get into a rebound. They can just as easily stay quiet and repress all interaction. But it really depends on the type of avoidant you're dealing with. Let's talk about that now. What's the difference between a straight-up dismissive avoidant and a fearful avoidant? Now, it's best to think of them on a spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, you have extremely anxious behaviors. On the other end of the spectrum, you have extremely avoidant behaviors. A dismissive avoidant is going to sit firmly in the avoidant camp, whereas a fearful avoidant will bounce between being extremely avoidant to extremely anxious to extremely avoidant to extremely anxious. Dismissive avoidants usually aren't as likely to immediately jump into a rebound. Why? Well, while they can use others to repress their complicated feelings from the fallout of a breakup, I believe they will only consider quickly moving on after their separation elation wears off. Sometimes that can take up to 4 months to occur. So what is separation elation? Well, remember this part of the circle, stage number 6? Oh, I'm so happy that I left. Well, here's another great quote about that stage from Free to Attach. After a relationship ends, people with an avoidant attachment style tend not to show much anxiety or distress, often feeling an initial sense of relief at the relinquishing of obligations and the sense that they are regaining their self-identity and not tending to initially miss their partner. This is separation elation as the pressure to connect is gone. Fearful avoidance, well, they're another story. So fearful avoidants are more likely to quickly move on after a breakup. The one adjective that I would use to describe a fearful avoidant would be volatile. They're more likely to be prone to mood swings with a breakup. And while they will go through that separation elation period, it doesn't last anywhere near as long as a straight up dismissive avoidance will. Remember, dismissive avoidants are all about independence. To a certain extent, so is a fearful avoidant, but that anxious side they have. Well, when it takes control, they can skip right to the depressive episode stage of the wheel. That causes them to want to find someone else as soon as possible. This is why I think people with the fearful avoidant attachment style are a lot more likely to have a volatile relationship history. So if there's one thing that you need to understand about if it's normal to move on quickly after a breakup, as a whole, no, it's not. But we're also, I think, needing to move the football forward a little bit on understanding what is a normal amount of time that it takes to move on. And research has shown that 6 to 12 months, anywhere in that time frame is usually pretty normal to move on. Anything earlier than that is considered quick.